African-American women are targets. When returning from abroad, they are disproportionately singled out and strip searched for drug smuggling by U.S. Customs. When Senior Customs Inspector Cathy Harris revealed this degrading practice, she was called a whistleblower. When the U.S. Marshal's Office was accused of racism and retaliation, the accuser, Matthew Fogg, was also called a whistleblower. Whistleblowing is an official government term for people who report fraud, abuses of law, rule, or regulation. Whistleblowers may also report gross mismanagement, a gross waste of funds, abuse of authority, or report substantial and specific danger to public health or safety. Life for a whistleblower can be tough.
It seems like in every other culture, it's not so much a negative connotation, around a whistleblower. It seems like in our culture it's extra negative, to be a whistleblower. But I mean, all in all, I guess if it's detrimental to your financial situation or your health, then, I guess you have to do what you have to do.
In 1997, Texaco made headlines when senior executive Richard Lunwall blew the whistle on other top executives for making racist remarks about African Americans, calling them black jelly beans. He tape recorded a meeting.
You can't just have witty and that. You can't have black jelly beans and other jelly beans. Yeah. Doesn't work.
There are situations that some BET viewers say they would blow the whistle.
If I see someone doing something they don't have any business.
No, there would be degrees of it. Like if somebody was Xeroxing stuff from church, I probably wouldn't tell. But if they were taking the whole Xerox machine out of there, I would tell.
I think anytime there's something that's done wrong to someone else, if I'm aware of it, just as being a God-fearing person, that it's my responsibility to, let me know what was done wrong.
For BET Tonight, I'm Annette Gibbs.
If they were taking the whole Xerox machine, you wouldn't have to tell. Somebody would catch them. Anyway, good evening and welcome to BET Tonight. I'm Tavis. Smiley is always glad that you're with us. We'll take your phone calls, your emails on tonight's topic in a moment. Also, in a moment, tonight's internet poll question. But first, we talk tonight with government servants who have risked their careers and potentially their lives to blow the whistle on wrongdoing in their respective agencies. Cathy Harris is a senior U.S. Customs inspector who says she has received retaliation and a pink slip for allegedly exposing excessive airport searches of black travelers, namely women, by the U.S. Customs Service. Matthew Fogg is a chief deputy U.S. Marshal who won a $4 million settlement. I ain't mad at you. $4 million settlement against the Justice Department for racial discrimination and harassment inside the Marshal Service. Finally joining us, Thomas Devine is an attorney and legal director for the Government Accountability Project, or GAP, a nonprofit law firm that represents corporate and government whistleblowers against retaliation. And of course, as always, we thank all of our guests for coming on to see us tonight. To our internet poll question, we'll go in a moment, but first we get our conversation started here. Cathy, what was the primary reason in your case for wanting to blow the whistle? Everybody knows, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that when you decide you're going to blow the whistle on something, there tends to be some sort of retaliation that comes against you. In your case, a pink slip. But why? What would motivate a sister to want to stand up and blow the whistle on folk when you know that your own career might be in jeopardy?
Because, Tavis, it was severe human rights violation, and I just couldn't take it anymore. In Atlanta, they was handcuffing travelers to the bed, especially black women, for 4 days for overtime purposes. In Chicago, they was making the females go into a room and strip totally naked, bend over, spread their cheeks, and cough. In Miami, they were making them defecate in front of the public while 2 armed inspectors stood there. These were severe human rights violations. Someone had to come forth. I live in Atlanta, the hometown of Dr. Martin Luther King. I knew it had to be me. So I came forth.
This, obviously, since you work for the Customs Service, it never happened to you, but I wonder, and I feel this sitting across this desk from you, that you were very passionate about this. Obviously, I'm glad you were and glad you are. But I almost get the sense that it was something that happened to you personally, but I suspect it didn't because you work for the Customs Service. But I can only assume, at least, that you feel as passionately, as viscerally about this malpractice, if I can put it that way, as you do and did because you happen to be a black woman.
Right, because I happen to be a black woman, and it affected me, and not just the, they weren't just going after the black female travelers, they was also going after the black females in custom. Most of the females in custom was passing out from nervous breakdowns, they was all on antidepressant medication, and I felt something had to be done. So what I did in October 1998, I formed an organization, I went to the black press, and I sought out the help of a media attorney in order to expose custom.
Matthew, same question. Why? I mean, it's a simple enough question, but a person has to either have a lot of guts, really be an advocate in the spirit of Dr. King, as Cathy mentioned a moment ago, or just be a fool to whistleblow in a situation where you know your own career might very well be damaged, and if not damaged, conceivably ended.
Right, that's correct. And the thing is, you have to, as a black person, you have to say to yourself, one of the things I said was, if I don't do something about it, who will? And the bottom line was, I saw, we had a manager that was just outright destroying the careers of African Americans. He brought one guy in his office and right in front of everybody, balled his papers up, threw it on the floor, and said, "Coon, get the hell out of my office." This was all testified to in trial. But when I stood up to this manager, which everybody was telling me, "Don't do it, Fogg. You know, you got your career, you got your concerns about your own life. Don't worry about that." I said, "No." I said, "God put me on this job, and I'm gonna stand up to it." And they came with me with everything they had, right down to the point of leaving me on a stakeout to get killed. In a dangerous stakeout in Baltimore, we took 2 people out that were heavily armed and dangerous. But this is what we're saying when it comes down to whistleblowing, which I don't even like that term, whistleblowing. Myself, I like to say, you know, we're behind that blue wall of silence. I mean, that's what it really is about. I mean, exposing the corruption and the criminality behind the badge. We often talk about what's in front of that badge, but I'm concerned about what's behind that badge.
You've heard this moniker, for lack of a better term, 1,000 times. This moniker that black folk specifically are the last ones hired, the first ones fired. Given that reality, again, I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding, while they might want to clandestinely, if they can do it in a secretive sort of way, to put the word out. You're a lot of us that might tell on somebody, a whistleblower, even though you hate that word. But when you are an African American and you are more often the last one hired and the first one fired, you know when you step forward that as an African American, it's going to be very, very difficult to find gainful employment again once they put the word out on you that you're a whistleblower.
Oh, no question about it. And that's the problem with most people. They tell you right up, once you do this, your career is over with. And what I found is, though, the thing that I had to be concerned about was my family, people coming behind me. This is the problem. This is why this stuff is able to perpetuate and stay in these organizations. You have to understand something. When you've got law enforcement officers that are out here doing these corrupt things, imagine what they do to the public. And this is the issue here, once again, is we are sworn to uphold the law. And that's the oath that I took. And that meant whether someone's violating the law who's working next to me or whether someone's violating the law in front of me.
Okay. Let me take a break. We got Thomas Devine here, an attorney who represents all kind of people who hear, I suspect he hears these stories on a regular basis. We'll talk to Mr. Devine in a moment and find out how often he hears these kinds of stories. And I want to get a little further in this conversation and find out whether or not this is not, I suspect, just a public service thing. There's also private sector cases that happen with regard to this. We all recall the Texaco incident, of course, a couple of years ago. So we'll talk more about it in just a moment, just getting started, and have the rest of the hour to develop this conversation with your live phone calls, and we'll do all that in just a moment. But first, tonight's internet poll question, you know the address, bet.com. Here is tonight's question. Under what circumstances, you heard the sister say earlier, if she caught them taking a Xerox machine, I love that. But under what circumstances would you become a whistleblower if lives were in danger, for moral or ethical reasons, to uncover negligence or corruption, for a reward, there's me, or for revenge? Why and what circumstances under which would you become a whistleblower? Log on, bet.com. Share your thoughts, as always, at the end of tonight's program, the results of what you had to say. Now we do as we always do. We turn to Cheryl Martin for a brief look at tonight's top news headlines, and then back to this conversation and your live phone calls. Good evening, Cheryl.
Good evening, Tavis. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Our top story tonight, several black Secret Service agents have filed a federal class action lawsuit alleging years of job discrimination. The agents held a news conference here in Washington today and talked about the years of humiliation they endured.
Comments like, you know, all blacks can't be trusted, or hold on to your wallet, there's another one, or I've never seen an honest Nigerian. They've all done something wrong, they just haven't been caught.
The Secret Service agents are seeking millions of dollars in damages. They specifically charged they were denied promotions, given dead-end assignments, unfairly disciplined, and subjected to repeated racial slurs. Out of about 2,500 agents, less than 250 are African American. A settlement has been reached in the custody case involving the 6-year-old Michigan boy who shot his classmate. Under the settlement, the court will have jurisdiction over the boy. He, his brother, and sister, however, will live with their aunt, not their mother. She is required to submit to counseling, drug testing, and attend parenting school. The publisher of the San Francisco Examiner newspaper, Timothy White, has been suspended. He is accused of offering a deal to the city's mayor. White testified he promised Mayor Willie Brown favorable editorials if he supported the company's plan to buy the San Francisco Chronicle. After the paper's owners, the Hearst Corporation, challenged his comments, White recanted his story. Mayor Brown denied there was any impropriety and says the publisher was, quote, bushwhacked. The testimony came in the federal antitrust trial earlier this week, challenging Hearst's $660 million purchase of the Chronicle. And in medical news, health experts meeting in Jackson, Mississippi today say it's time to make medical research for minorities a priority. They point to startling statistics such as African American men are 3 times more likely to die from cardiovascular diseases than white men. Experts say there are thousands of preventable deaths each year, which is why there is a dire need for comprehensive medical research on minorities. One problem, researchers say, is that unfortunately minority patients are less likely to volunteer to be part of the studies. And in international news, some disturbing statistics tonight about AIDS in Africa. The country's health minister says about 500,000 Rwandans are reportedly infected with HIV. That's 6% of the population. And these victims are swamping the country's hospitals and overtaxing its medical workers. Rwandan women ages 25 to 29 are most at risk of contracting the disease. And in entertainment news, Tiger Woods is joining the actors' strike by refusing to shoot a Nike commercial. Woods was scheduled to shoot the commercial yesterday in Florida, but instead decided to honor the walkout by the Screen Actors Guild. The superstar athlete is just one of more than 100,000 commercial actors the Guild represents. And a Los Angeles mortgage broker is no longer a suspect in the murder of rapper Notorious B.I.G. Amir Muhammad found out in December police were investigating whether he was paid by Notorious B.I.G.'s rival, Marion Suge Knight, to kill him. A detective on the case now says that is no longer a theory. The slain rapper, whose real name is Christopher Wallace, was gunned down in 1997. Those are some stories making headlines. Stay tuned for more BET Tonight after the break. Tonight's topic, whistleblowers.
The monetary issue is highly likely that you have to say that, yeah, I'm gonna interject my little comment or do what I can to prevent a problem. But if it's just a quality issue, if it's just a quality issue, it's not important. You know, if it's money or if it's livelihood, then okay. But I mean, black people as a whole, as far as I'm concerned, we need to stick together a little bit more. You know, everybody else is. So.
BET Tonight is brought to you by Blockbuster, where you'll find more copies of new releases than ever before. Get your movie and go home happy.
Big news from Blockbuster. With new extended rentals, you can keep your movies 12 hours longer. Now they're not due back till noon, so you'll never have to hurry through a movie to get it back by midnight.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can. What?
Rent Fight Club at Blockbuster this week and keep it 12 hours longer. Starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. Directed by David Fincher. Rated R. Wow. Fight Club this week at Blockbuster.
Who says you have light? A little tartness can be refreshing. Crystal Light Ruby Red Grapefruit. A fruity blend of tart and sweet and just 5 calories. So, drink to your heart's content.
Dale Jarrett here with a very special offer. A new CD of all my favorite tracks. Immerse yourself in one of my personal favorites, the melodic grandeur of Daytona International Speedway. The dulcet tones of Lowe's Motor Speedway. Set your spirits soaring to the sounds of California Speedway. Of course, these performances are better live. But bring your Visa card, because at these tracks you can't buy tickets with an American Express card.
Visa, it's everywhere NASCAR fans want to be.
This is my favorite part.
Give me your finger right here. Just
Who's this for?
Thanks for Granny. You know she expects perfume.
Whatever she's expecting, Sears has the gift for every mama on your Mother's Day list. All fine jewelry is 40 to 50% off.
Auntie Delana.
Oh, she's gonna scream.
And all dresses $49.99 to $89.99 are on sale. Save $10 to $30.
Both mamas, Granny and Auntie Delana. So we're done.
What about me?
But you're not a...
This mama's expecting.
Expect savings to shout about this Mother's Day at Sears.
Indulge yourself in a world of musical entertainment. All you have to do is call 1-877-C-JAZZ to request the Jazz Channel. Catch Herbie Hancock for some high-tech info for cyber-savvy jazz fans on Future Wave. The Jazz Channel sizzles with the hottest Latin music and Latin videos on Latin Beat. You can even join me on Jazz Scene. Get discovered on Jazz Discovery. You can't beat that. Because before hip-hop, before R&B, there was this thing called jazz.
Emerge is thought-provoking, controversial, informative, cutting edge. Emerge, Black America's news magazine, where you go to get the inside story on issues that are important to you. To subscribe, call 1-800-218-8722. Plus, you'll receive a free African American history appointment calendar with your paid subscription. Call now and get Black America's news magazine. Get Emerge.
You're just 3 days away from the biggest party in TV history. May 6th at 8 p.m. live.
When it comes to somebody's life at stake, especially a child, that's a lot that I would have.
Things like child abuse, you need to speak out against that because children can't speak for themselves.
I guess if it had something to do with my child, then I would, I would be a whistleblower. If it was something detrimental to my child or something like that.
What about when it doesn't have anything to do with your child? Can you take a stand then? Welcome back to BET Tonight. I'm Tavis, Smiley. Glad you're with us as we talk tonight with people who have risked all to tell all about wrongdoing in their respective U.S. government agencies. Some call them snitches, some call them rats, some call them whistleblowers. I'm sure they've been called a whole lot worse. Cathy Harris is a senior U.S. Customs inspector from Atlanta, and she could be fired soon after blowing the whistle on excessive customs airport searches of African-American travelers. Matthew Fogg has been in some of the most dangerous law enforcement situations in his job as a chief deputy U.S. Marshal. Still, a court has ruled that Fogg was the victim of racial discrimination and harassment by the Marshal Service and gave the brother $4 million. And finally, Thomas Devine is legal director for the Government Accountability Project, or GAP, a private public interest firm that represents whistleblowers against retaliation. Our conversation resumes in just 30 seconds after I once again invite you to participate in tonight's internet poll question at BET.com. Here is tonight's question. Under what circumstances would you become a whistleblower? If lives were in danger, moral, ethical reasons to uncover negligence or corruption for a reward, for revenge, under what circumstances would you personally become a whistleblower? Log on to BET.com as always at the end of tonight's program, the results of what you had to say. Now we get back to our conversation. Cathy, I mentioned a moment ago, or actually earlier in the show, that you've been given a pink slip. And now I mentioned, of course, to our audience that you might likely be fired in the next few weeks, and I want to hear from your attorney here in a moment. But explain to me what your status is right now.
Well, I'm on unpaid stress leave as of, Fox 5 in Atlanta aired my show February 99, and July 99, I went out on unpaid stress leave. The doctor took me off the job because I literally couldn't work there anymore. And now Custom is refusing to give me any kind of advanced sick leave, annual leave, or workers' comp or anything. So I haven't gotten any kind of pay at all in 8 months. So in the next 30 days, I will find out if I'm homeless and if I'm terminated.
Thomas, I want to ask you, first of all, thanks for coming on. I want to ask you a couple of things. One, how often you hear these kinds of stories. And two, I think some watching right now no doubt find it reprehensible. I certainly do. One would think, and I cast no aspersion on government agencies per se, but one would think that when someone, and again, I understand why Matthew doesn't necessarily like the word whistleblower, but if these folk are doing what's right, coming forth and telling the truth about how government employees are mistreating the very folk who pay their salaries every day, why would an agency not stand behind their employee as opposed to mistreating them, as apparently the Customs Service is doing against Cathy here? That's the second question. But first, how often do you hear these kind of stories?
Oh, I hear them all the time. This is the facts of life in bureaucracies, whether they're government or corporate. If someone's threatening a bureaucracy, it fights back. It's almost like an animal instinct. When someone hits me, I don't stop to think, well, maybe I had that coming, or there's something to learn from it. I want to get rid of them. I want to eliminate the threat, and government agencies and corporations behave the same way. They try to neutralize whatever is threatening them.
How often do you obviously with a firm that handles these kinds of cases, these exceptions to the rule, these kinds of cases with Matthew and Cathy aberrations, or is it increasingly, as you see, becoming the rule and not the exception?
It all depends on how serious the problem is that they're raising and how mature the leaders of the agency are. If there's outstanding leadership, the whistleblower may have a fighting chance to survive without asserting legal rights. But as a rule, the more threatening the information, the more certain it is that the agency is going to strike back and try to silence them.
Matthew, you have any reason to believe, other than the fact that you have done the right thing and in your case won a lawsuit, I wonder whether or not in your heart of hearts you feel like, I don't want to ask whether or not you think you did the right thing, but I want to ask whether or not you think you helped other people in the process. In some respects, you hurt yourself, no debate there. But do you think on the flip side that you actually helped anybody by your coming forth?
Well, I think so. In the Marshal Service, certainly we just got a African-American director who's been mandated to come in and clean house, and he started to do that. So, and he even said himself, he's going to go through this thing to fix it. So I think it's doing some things, but the bottom line is I'm still fighting. I mean, the agency has appealed this case, so it's still a rumble. And the problem is, once again, as Mr. Levine has just said, the agency digs in. One of the things that came out of my trial was the judge asked that question. He said, are you telling me the Marshal Service dug its heels in? And one of the political managers looked right at him. This is a SCS, and he said, absolutely. So the bottom line is what you have is you've got an agency trying to protect itself. In the meantime, it's a law enforcement agency. So once again, and in this case, we're talking about racism. So we're talking about blowing the whistle on racism, which is something, once you make a step in law enforcement, I mean, we've heard all of the incidents about what happens in law enforcement. And like I said myself, I had to literally look down the barrel of a gun, in this career.
Thomas, do you find that more people, I shouldn't say more people, do you find that more, with regard to the government, I speak now, do you find that more government agencies, to use Matt's words, dig their heels in on cases of racism, on cases of gender bias, on cases of sexism? What kinds of cases, if you can clarify, do you find that the government becomes more, takes a more entrenched, hard-line, hard-nosed, digging in our heels position?
I think it's wherever the powers that be feel threatened. Almost anywhere where there's a bureaucracy, there's going to be abuse of power. We see it with covering up for the powerful. Law enforcement investigators who are not allowed to pursue the evidence against politically well-connected criminals. We see it with environmental crimes not being enforced. We see it with fraud wherever there's spending. We see it with abuses of power that trample on the rights of ordinary citizens. Whistleblowers, unfortunately, are challenging the powers that be. They're the Achilles heel of bureaucratic corruption, and they change the course of history, but they're treated like, we say that whistleblowing is committing the truth, because they're treated like they committed a crime, for being honest.
Cathy Harris's actions may in fact change the course of history with regard to the U.S. Customs Service. I got to take a break. On the other side of this break, I want to ask Cathy, with all due respect to changing the course of history, facing perhaps termination, would she do it again? We'll ask Cathy that and get to your live phone calls in just a moment. But first, you're watching BET Tonight on Black Entertainment Television. Stay with us.
Hey, give me your finger right here. Just
Who's this for?
Thanks for Granny. You know she expects perfume.
Whatever she's expecting, Sears has the gift for every mama on your Mother's Day list. All fine jewelry is 40 to 50% off.
Auntie Delana.
Oh, she's gonna scream.
And all dresses $49.99 to $89.99 are on sale. Save $10 to $30.
Both mamas, Granny and Auntie Delana. So we're done.
What about me?
But you're not a...
This mama's expecting.
Expect savings to shout about this Mother's Day at Sears.
It's the humidity. I overcooked it. Somehow I inherited my Uncle Lester's hair genes.
Don't excuse your hair. Infuse your hair with Infusium 23.
If your hair requires an explanation like mine, you need Infusium 23 shampoos, conditioners, and leave-in treatments. Infusium infuses my hair with 23 essential elements to repair, even strengthen it. You see the difference?
Don't excuse your hair.
Infuse your hair
with Infusium 23.
Why is it models always look 15?
Wrinkles? Talked to her in about 20 years.
At the Ponce Institute, we don't give you hype, just results. Our age-defying lotion is proven to visibly reduce fine lines by up to 77%. Age-defying lotion, no hype, just younger-looking skin.
When the engineering passion at Dodge explodes, boldness, strength, and style come together. In the Dodge Intrepid, our passion came together. In a 225 horsepower aluminum engine with cab-forward design and aggressive coupe-like styling. In the Dodge Durango, we flexed our muscles with magnum power, aluminum wheels, a third seat, and infinity speaker system for some serious pumping. For the driver and you, this is Dodge. Different.
Who says you have to be all sweetness and light? A little tartness can be refreshing. New Crystal Light Ruby Red Grapefruit, a fruity blend of tart and sweet and just 5 calories. So, drink to your heart's content. Crystal
There is an alternative to the ordinary. Pork, the other white meat.
Who can solve this? Mr. Montez.
Last Saturday in the Army Reserve, I linked up 40 tanks, 60 Humvees, and 7,000 troops. On Monday, class was no sweat.
Not bad, Mr. Montez.
As little as 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. Army Reserve.
And we don't vote.
Nas is hot. After Million Man March.
It's not having enough positive role models.
I don't see anything wrong with being 20.
We're all looking for something.
The internet is not all negative things.
Rakim is the best lyricist. No.
Black on Black crime project.
Well, how do we change that?
Accountability.
The first girl I fell in love with is the same girl I'm with now.
Most searches, the vast majority of searches are generated as a result of an interview. And again, we have advanced passenger information. We know where people are coming from. We know their itinerary. Some people who have unusual itineraries are going to be singled out and spoken to by our inspectors. Oftentimes, they have inconsistent statements. That kind of leads to further examination. There cannot be any racial element in the selection of who we speak to.
Commissioner. Welcome back to BET Tonight. I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad you're with us. There you see Cathy's ultimate boss, Ray Kelly, of the U.S. Customs Service, who I'm told may very well be leaving the Customs Department in a few weeks to go work for Hillary Rodham Clinton in that Senate campaign in New York. We'll see. In any event, you heard your boss speaking there a moment ago, Cathy, on tape. I wonder, as I asked before the break, whether or not, despite the fact that, as Thomas says, the actions of those who come forth in a bold and brave, quite frankly, sort of way, might ultimately change the course of history. It does not do a whole lot of good for your own personal situation and your own personal station in life. I wonder, in retrospect, whether on the eve, perhaps in a matter of weeks of losing your own job, whether or not you do it again.
Yes, I would do it again. Because of my whistleblowing, Tavis, laws has been changed. They cannot detain passengers now for over 2 hours without allowing them to call a family member or an attorney. They cannot detain them for over 4 hours without U.S. Customs going before a magistrate to give a magistrate evidence of why they are detaining these passengers. So the reforms are working, but there's a lot of more work needs to be done. I've given up everything for the public, everything for America. I'm asking America to get behind me now. If I'm homeless, I can't help anyone. I want my organization to expand, and we want to continue to be an oversight committee over U.S. Customs.
You saw the article, I'm certain, and if you didn't see it, I'm sure your attorney brought it to your attention just a few weeks ago, a cover story on USA Today. I'm just recollecting here now. I remember talking about it on the Tom Joyner Show. An article on the cover of USA Today, front page story, that talked about the fact that women, as you already know, black women in particular, are still harassed, still stopped, still stripped, still searched more often than anybody else in the country when they are coming back into the country. And you saw the story.
No, I didn't see the story, but I know of the story.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you feel, Thomas? Are you familiar with the story in the USA Today?
Yeah, in fact,
how do you feel when you see a story like that and you know you have a client who's stepping forward to try to do something about that, and yet we still see stories as recent as 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe even sooner than that, depending on how bad my memory is, that still surface on front pages of U.S. newspapers that black women are still, despite Cathy's efforts, still the primary target.
I think that story was out there because of the efforts of people like Cathy. And I was in Central Europe when that story broke, and it was published in Slovakia. And I knew that this woman,